Today we read the second book of Chronicles, chapter 12. I don't know how good your Old Testament history is. In case it's rusty, I'll remind you that Rehoboam was son of Solomon and succeeded to the throne after him. He had an immediate rebellion on his hands. Under the leadership of Jeroboam, the northern tribes rebelled against him, and Jeroboam set up a separate kingdom in the north. So this was the beginning of the divided kingdom, and that continued on for many generations. It was the end of the united land. Israel and Judah were never again united as they had been under David and Solomon. The golden age was over, and it had not lasted very long. When enemies attacked the land, the prophets and those who wrote these narratives generally attributed the reasons to God's anger for failing to keep the covenant in one way or another. And when the king of Egypt, Shishak, threatened Rehoboam, this was the interpretation given. I'm interested in the remark attributed to God in verse 8. They shall be his servants, i.e. Judah will serve Egypt, so that they may know the difference between serving me, God, and serving the kingdoms of other lands. Clearly, the narrator thought Rehoboam had made a fundamental error of judgment. In rebelling against God, he'd thrown away great advantages and taken on a terrible burden. Sure enough, Shishak plundered Jerusalem, and that process continued under a series of foreign powers for centuries, culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem under the Babylonian Empire in the 8th century, when the temple itself was destroyed. These disasters were all attributed to disobedience, unfaithfulness to God. We cannot know what would have happened in the politics of the region if the Jews had been totally faithful to the covenant with God, since we can't wind back the clock. But I can't help comparing this interpretation of events with Jesus' words in the Gospel when he said, "Take my yoke upon you, for I am gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls." And I'm also reminded of the phrase, that beautiful phrase in the traditional morning collect for peace, whose service is perfect freedom. So what is it about serving God which Rehoboam undervalued and threw away, and which can be described as perfect freedom? St. John wrote, "The truth will set you free." All the prophecies of the Messianic age were about being freed from oppression, whether political, physical, mental, or spiritual. Being made whole, saved, gaining health and salvation. It is God who has given us our freedom. God gave us free will. And God extends to us an invitation of love, inviting us to respond with love voluntarily. We're free to accept or reject God. But if we reject God and choose to serve elsewhere, beware. That service can turn into tyranny in a moment. Whether we serve self and find that empty ultimately, or whether we become enslaved to some addiction or compulsion and find that we cannot easily escape it. When offered love, freedom, truth, goodness, beauty, why would we ever look elsewhere? It makes no sense. And yet, that's the human condition. We do look elsewhere. We do idolize other gods in whatever shape or form. So, like Rehoboam, we find that we have thrown away all that is good for us, all that is of real value, and we're grasping after straws. Until we remember that offer and turn back to find Jesus still saying, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. My service is perfect freedom."